have Elizabeth Brennan, who's the head of advertiser strategy at Permutive. I'm lucky enough to have seen Elizabeth speak before, so we're going to be hearing from her on starting from scratch and building on privacy. Privacy, obviously, a huge topic at the moment. So I'd like to welcome Elizabeth to the stage now. Please put your hands together for Elizabeth from Permutive.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And after 18 months of doing this sitting behind a laptop, I suddenly have an awful lot of sympathy for bands who come back for one last tour and haven't spoken to a crowd for a while. So it's great to be here today. It's an amazing atmosphere, and I hope you're all having a good day so far. So there we go. What am I here to talk to you about? I'm here to talk to you about a little bit of the chaos that we might be experiencing in digital marketing right now and today. How do we get here? I'll be brief on that, I promise. I'm not going to give you a history lesson. But I'm going to talk a lot about the way forwards. And then I'm going to close out with a little bit of hope for us all. So where are we today? I think we can agree that at the moment our industry feels relatively chaotic. There's news and guidance every single day, and best practices are changing weekly. The thing that there does seem to be alignment on is that there is no easy fix right now, and that there will be no one replacement for third-party cookies when they go away. There are some solutions perhaps that aren't ready, or that are vague about how they meet the rising challenges of privacy and consumers. So shall we all just go home then? We've all made careers out of this. Perhaps some people have made a little bit of money. Is it the time to kiss goodbye to digital advertising as we know it? I don't think so. Because if we bottom line all the news, and if we bottom line what privacy regulators are saying, really the truth is that all that needs to change is tracking people across environments is no longer acceptable. We need to rebuild strategies and rebuild our way of working that puts privacy at the front and center of our industry. And this means thinking a little bit differently about this notion of identity. Now, identity at the moment is the subject of an awful lot of the press that we're reading. And I think it's slightly confusing because identity and how identity are used are not the same thing. Identity is ultimately fundamental to advertising. It's really important that advertisers know who they're targeting and have built sophisticated kind of audience strategies. For publishers, it's incredibly important that they understand who's browsing their properties and what their different preferences are. It's really how and where we use identity that is a change that we need to prepare for. Don't freak out, I promise this is the most technical slide in the entire presentation. I won't bore you with it for too long. But right now, digital advertising works on this notion of a bid stream. And a bid stream is a bunch of information that is what digital media is traded on. Today, in the here and now, it's an individual's ID that is used in this bid stream. So that could be a cookie ID. We know that that's not sustainable. We know that that's not going to be the way that we work moving forwards. At the moment, it allows us to do things like modeling, attribution, targeting. It's pretty handy. But in the new world, what we will pass in this bid stream is called a cohort ID. And a cohort ID is a description of the user, i.e. this person is interested in automobiles or sport. And what this allows advertisers to do is target digital media, but without really compromising user privacy. Yeah, my slides don't seem to be... There we go, marvelous. So the digital ecosystem is increasingly complex, and I think anyone who's seen kind of a recent marketecture can really appreciate how many players have come into the market. And they're designed really to eke out every single bit of value from every dollar, every pound, every penny that's spent in media. The reality that we work in today in digital marketing is that efficiency is front and center of everything that we do. Every decision in digital media at the moment is made by a machine talking to a machine. They decide the individuals that are targeted, they decide the formats, they decide the creative. They decide the ROI that we should hit. It's a monumental amount of data that's needed to make that happen. And all of that data is stitched together with an ID. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the ISBAR programmatic supply chain case study, but that found that for 15 advertisers to reach 12 publishers, their data went through 300 different supply chains. It's just sort of mind-boggling how complex the ecosystem has become. And machines are great. I'm not here to knock machine learning. But somehow we kind of forgot about people in the equation. And that's okay, because sometimes we do need to take stock, intervene, and think of a new way of working when things go wrong. In my view, advertising is about three core things: people, advertisers, and media owners. And we've all experienced brilliant advertising when those three things come together in harmony. It doesn't have to be a poor experience. It can be provocative, interesting, and innovative. So with all of that in mind, how could we rebuild an ecosystem, and what would be the principles that we use to take it forward? Well, I think the first thing that we would agree on is that we wouldn't put IDs into the ecosystem. We wouldn't compromise people's identity like that. There's a Forrester report that's revealed that although 60% of individuals understand that their data is collected online, the same proportion of them don't think it's okay that that's shared amongst other players. The second thing I think we'd agree on is that browser data would stay in the environment in which it was captured. What does that mean? I think we've all seen the kind of horror stories of bad advertising. We've all seen the fridge problem. You know, you've bought a fridge already and you're followed around by John Lewis fridge adverts. That wouldn't happen if we weren't skimming data from environments where where your behavior was being exhibited rather. I mean, at worst, it's kind of creepy. At worst, it could be dangerous even. The third thing I think we'd agree on is transparency for customers. So at the moment, I think there's a lot of frustration from real people who use the internet who aren't working in our industry, about how their data is used online because they don't understand how it's being collected and used. In fact, 1 in 5 customers have stopped spending money with brands because of the way they've treated their first-party data. And I'll come on to talk about that stat a little bit more later on. And the final thing, and one of the things I think is the most important, is that I don't think we would collect and use data that somebody wasn't in control of. So cookies are not perfect, but at least a user can delete a cookie. A user can't delete or change their IP address or their home address. And I think if they thought that this was being collected with other soft signals to build a picture with them online, they'd kind of be outraged by that. So I don't think we'd do that anymore either. There we go. So what data is privacy compliant then? What data would we use in this new ecosystem? The first is that there would be a direct relationship. And what is this direct relationship I'm talking about? It means that the person collecting the data has a direct relationship with the person who's given them that data. So that could be CRM data if you're an advertiser, that could be browsing data if you're a publisher. The second is that you would have first-party data. And I know there's been a lot of talk today about the importance of first-party data and what first-party data means. But just in case anyone's not clear, because it means different things for different businesses, first-party data for advertisers would be CRM information, loyalty card information, email addresses, etc. For a publisher and a media owner, it's how do people consume media on their environments. And the third thing I think we'd agree on is that this data would need to be collected in a privacy-safe way. It would need to be collected in an environment where someone was controlling who was able to access it. With this in mind, we need to understand how advertisers can continue to execute sophisticated digital media plans using privacy-safe data and using the principles that I talked about a couple of minutes ago. The importance of first-party data can't really be understated. So the importance of advertisers being able to reach high lifetime value customers, people who've lapsed, perhaps if you're a telco, someone who's about to roll off their contract. This first-party data is incredibly important, And what you can do is matching that with a similar identifier. So in the here and now, perhaps a cookie ID, in the future, probably an email address, is reach that upon a publisher's website. The only caveat with doing that is that the reach of that is relatively limited. And the reason for that is because you as an advertiser have to have the same identifier as a publisher, and not everyone gives their identifiers in that deterministic way online. You can, of course, scale that. You can model that information, there are plenty of solutions out there who do that in a pretty sophisticated way. But if you can only reach people who are already logged in, again, the scale is relatively limited. So what does that mean for brands who put things like incrementality and brand consideration, brand awareness at the heart of their media plans? It means that they need to work with other data owners. So publishers are a great example of other data owners. They have a direct and first-party relationship with everybody that comes to their site. This means that they're able to understand the behavior of every single user. And earlier on today, I talked about this notion of cohort IDs. This is the grouping of users, the description of users. Publishers are in an incredibly privileged position to be able to pass advertisers these cohort IDs for the purposes of targeting. And what that means is that advertisers can target new users, incremental users, in a way that does not compromise people's privacy. So what would be the 4 things that I advise advertisers to do right now, today? Because with all this confusion, it could feel like you need to give yourselves a little bit of immunity against all the news, all the changes that are happening in the market at the moment. Well, the first is start transitioning to a cohort-based way of buying. Start testing it. If you think about how long it's taken you to build and hone your digital media strategies, it is years and years. And right now, whilst cookies have kind of a stay of execution, it's actually not a lot of time for you to start working in this new way and developing strategies that continue to allow you to do the sort of things that you would do today in media. The second thing I would advise advertisers to do is start building direct relationships with publishers. As I said before, these businesses understand the customers who come to their sites. If you have a deep and strategic relationship with them, then you can start to leverage the insights they can give you and reach people at scale. The third thing I think advertisers need the ability to do is onboard their first-party data without the risk of that leaking into the ecosystem. So particularly for players who are FMCG, they don't have a lot of first-party data, and that makes it incredibly precious within those businesses. So working with people who respect the sanctity of that and who will allow you to kind of match and activate without putting that data back into the ecosystem is just fundamentally important. And then lastly, advertisers will need the ability to scale through insights and modeling. Working with people who provide a clear understanding of the people who are interested in your brand and helping you to bring new users into your brand is incredibly important. I know it seems like we have a lot of time to make these decisions, and I talked about these stats a little bit earlier. So 1 in 5 people have already avoided buying a brand. I mean, it's really overdramatic of me to say, but if you imagined 20% of your customers walking away from your brands overnight, just imagine how painful that would be for the bottom line. It would make it so hard to reach any of your revenue, any of your marketing goals. But in the absence of control, in the absence of information, people are taking back control the only way they can, and that is with their wallets. So they will not spend money with brands they don't think respects their first-party data. And I don't know if anyone in the room is a Radio 2 listener. My mum is a Radio 2 listener. She messaged me the other day because on the lunchtime show Jeremy Vine, I should say other radio shows are available, they were talking about cookies and the absolute fury of people phoning in, listing companies that had a very long list of cookie IDs, etc., on their website. So these companies are being transparent about the people who are collecting their data, but these customers have never, ever heard of these businesses. And that's kind of the problem. In the absence of understanding and transparency, people will make up their own truth, And again, they will take back power the only way they can. So for anyone who kind of thinks that they might have time to make these changes, this is not an industry problem anymore. You know, The Guardian, the BBC, other news publications are talking about privacy. They're talking about the regulatory issues that are affecting our industry, and people are becoming more and more well-read on their rights and how they can behave online. And great progress has been made, particularly over the last 12 months, but there's still really, really a long way to go. So 41% of brands, these are numbers from a Forrester survey, still rely exclusively on targeting from third-party data. Given what we know about third-party data, how that's collected, how consumers feel about it, doesn't really feel like that's appropriate anymore, and probably there's time to kind of move away from that. I appreciate, you know, it's super confusing. There's an awful lot to do, but only 23% of advertisers have a strategy at the moment. And actually, there are different ways of working that you can employ right now that will allow you to kind of protect yourselves and respect your customers' privacy. In fact, at Permutive, we've seen a 49-fold increase in terms of publisher-targeted impressions this year alone. That is nuts. That is an enormous trend, and the numbers will not go backwards from there. So aside from customers being kind of annoyed about how we're using their data and the fact that the way that this data is being processed isn't particularly privacy compliant, there are other things, there are other reasons why we should make this change. The first is we can have a much cleaner supply chain. We can understand, you can understand as advertisers where your data is going, who it's going to, and more importantly, how the data that you're using to collect and target your users online is much more privacy compliant. There's integrity in that data. You can have stability for the future. So again, we talked at the start of the presentation about the different changes, the different news articles, etc. You know, I can imagine as a marketing director at the moment, privacy should take up 2 to 3% of your time. It's probably taking up more like 10 to 15 at the moment. And lastly, we can start rebuilding customer trust, which I think is fundamental to how we operate as an industry. Rebuilding takes time. It's not easy, but does anyone know how many cars Tesla are set to ship this year? 800,000. They outsell any electric car 3 to 1. That is absolutely phenomenal. At one point, they were losing $800 million a year. In the next year, they were making $700 million. Tesla rebuilt an entire auto industry by focusing on one thing: making transport more sustainable. And we have the most incredible opportunity because we have the opportunity to readdress the balance in trust and data integrity between advertisers, media owners, and customers. What's super exciting about this is I'm not talking about some sort of egalitarian future that's like 18 months in the future. This can happen right here, right now, and we can all be the innovators that make this change happen. So let's start working, I think, with safe, consented, and sustainable data. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. I've been Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Absolutely fascinating. We have a question from Matt Bushy.
Wow.
I'm hoping that that's going to appear on the screen behind me. What single thing should brand advertisers do today to prepare for the end of cookies?
That is such a great question. I think it sounds trite, but make a test and learn roadmap. Understand where the perhaps like risk profiles are on your current tech stack, and understand which partners, whether that is a technical partner like Permutive or a publisher partner, are able to give you strategic solutions to start helping your businesses prepare for this future that we're entering.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Some actionable insights there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Big round of applause, please, for Elizabeth.